Thank you for joining us on the first day of the seventh year of Phoenix Startup Week. John Johnson, who is going to talk to us all about brand and identity. John, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, take it
I'm
away.
ready. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here and kicking off Startup Week, Phoenix Startup Week 2021. Man, uh, it's been a while since I've been to Phoenix. If some of you may know me, I actually spent most of my entrepreneurial career in Phoenix, moved away from there in 2017, actually. And I'm just excited and honored to be back here, especially speaking after people like Dan Tyre, who is my mentor, actually. And he is the man and just being a part of this incredible community. So welcome to You Do Not Need a Logo, You Need an Identity. I know most of you came here just because of that title of the talk, maybe. I don't know. But today is going to be a very interactive talk. As Kate mentioned, not only is it going to be interactive, ask questions, share comments, so on and so forth, but it's also going to be interactive in a workshop style experience. So grab a pen and paper if you want. Would love to run through some exercises with you, and would love to run through some tips as to how to use your identity as a secret sauce, as a secret weapon. And I'm going to walk through why we are here, right? Why I think a lot of you are here as you answer some of the polling questions. But I'm also going to walk through a little bit about me and how I feel about logos. All right. And a little bit about our approach to branding and design at A Small Studio, which is my agency that I lead and founded back in 2007 after 17 after I left Phoenix. All right. So those are the housekeeping items, and we're going to dive into it. All right. All right. So I want you to think and start this. I want to start this conversation off with my boy Simon Sinek always says, "What? Start with why." All right, but even though that was my Bible when I first started my first startup, I would say I have since then evolved and transitioned into this question of starting with who. Right. I believe that by understanding who you are as an individual, as a human being, each and every one of you individually is your secret sauce, is your secret weapon to differentiate yourself from everyone, to make decisions faster, to make them more efficiently, but ultimately to live life on purpose. All right. So I want to start by asking you that question. Who are you? It's a big question, I know. But when you are asked that question, how do you respond? What are the first words that come to your mind? Maybe it's a title. Maybe it's an occupation. Maybe it's a location. All right, who are you? I want you to think about those words that come to mind when you answer that question for yourself. And I want you to think about them intently, because those words matter. And whatever came up for you when you answered that question. The word identification is derived from the Latin word item, meaning same, and facere, which means to make. So when I identify with something, I make it the same as me. All right. So when I ask you that question, who are you? Whatever words that came to mind, I want you to be confident and sure that you will actually say that you are the same as that word. All right. But the fact is, you are not the same as anyone else. The fact is, you are 1 in 7.8 billion. There is no other person in the world that's like you or me. All right. So when you think of that question, who are you? The fact is, you are very unique, and you're more unique than anything that you could possibly create. A logo. You're more unique than a product. You're more unique than your startup. You're more unique than all of those things. All right. But it's a journey to get there. Wouldn't you say? It's a journey to find out who you are. It's a journey to realize how you're not the same as anyone else. All right. So I want to start by just going through my journey. All right. When I first realized that I was not the same as anyone else, I was a kid. I grew up in inner city Cleveland, Ohio. I had a lot of friends on my street in my neighborhood, but I remember the moment one of my friends came up to me and said, "John, I can't play with you anymore because you're black." And I remember that moment really, really succinctly because the fact is, I just saw myself as another kid on the street, on the block, playing with my friends. All right, but the fact is, I we were Italian. We were an Italian neighborhood. My mom, full Italian. I'm half Italian. I'm half black. Right, but on that street, we were the black family. Right? And as traumatizing as that experience was for me, it actually was an opportunity for me to grow. And it actually set me up for success and a lot of other experiences where I was going to realize that I wasn't the same as other people. All right. Another time when I realized that was when I was a student studying architecture in college, getting my master's of architecture degree. I was actually studying in Florence, Italy, and one of the cops, the policia, stopped me and asked for my papers, and they didn't ask any other student for their papers. All right, why was that? Well, I was the only black student in my class in my architecture school. Actually, ended up graduating, the only black kid graduating with a master's of architecture at Kent State University. All right, but this experience didn't stop me from gaining the most of my perspective of being in Florence, seeing that architecture, seeing that culture, all right, traveling Europe and using every resource I could, right, to take advantage of those resources and use them, to grow, to use them to gain a better perspective. All right. That transitioned into me being an architect. Actually, studied did practice architecture in Phoenix, Arizona, at a firm called Architecton. This building is the Zion building in Tempe, Arizona, if you know about it. But I found out myself in a similar situation where I was the only black person in my architecture firm. All right, so you can see a little pattern here. Starting when I was younger, realizing that I was not the same as other people. But I got more and more comfortable with it, realizing that it was a privilege and then it was an advantage. Right. And I used that opportunity again to reimagine Phoenix and walkability in Phoenix, Arizona. All right. Some of you might recognize this building. It actually was designed by my favorite architect, Bjarke Ingels. And his design of this building is iconic. It was even in the Netflix special, uh the abstract, if you've seen it. It's iconic building. It was proposed to go in downtown Phoenix. Now the city wasn't too happy about it, but I was pumped for it. Not just out of school, working with this architect and working on an incredible development project that could change the way that Phoenix was seen by the whole world. All right. And that experience of architecture and studying and being a student, all of that led me to be an entrepreneur. I thought architecture was the best way to learn how to be an entrepreneur because of the iterative thinking, the creative processing, right? Science, artistry, so on and so forth. Right. And I was an entrepreneur. In 2014, I became an entrepreneur. Actually started my first startup called Feel Free. Some of you on this call may actually remember that startup. If you go to some of the local coffee shops, you may still see the logo on the door. All right, but we were out to not change the built environment, but to actually change the way that people interacted face to face within those built environments. I learned so much on this journey. But another thing that I realized that was similar to my other experiences was the fact that I was one of very few Black people in architecture in the entrepreneurship community. All right. And then further on, realizing that, what, less than 1% of Black founders would actually receive venture capital. Right. I was going against the odds, but it was similar. It was common throughout my life. And I was prepared for that. Now, Feel Free did not succeed in the sense of the term, but we learned a lot. I learned a lot. I learned that I had a passion for community building. All right, that's what Feel Free was all about for me. It helped me to understand my passion for community building. All right, and I started to do that in Phoenix. All right, starting with Seed Spot, representing Seed Spot. helped them launch one of the largest demo days in Arizona history. I think 1,200 people packed the Orpheum Theater, right? Really promoting social entrepreneurship. Right? But I also launched the African American Boot Camp, right? The first African American entrepreneurial boot camp in Arizona, from what I hear. I produced it, fundraised for it, brought all these people together to be a catalyst for others so that they have to experience the same thing that I experienced, right? And that just kept on going for me. How do I bridge the gap between communities where I was maybe had a privileged perspective of seeing the only, right, and helping others to experience the same thing? So ultimately, I became an agency leader, which is why a lot of you are here to learn a little bit of from me and my perspective on this. I moved to Seattle after Phoenix, and I realized I was really good at helping people start. I was really good at branding, launching something from nothing, right? And my firm, A Small Studio, now at 6 people strong after about 3.5 years. All right, we are a collection of creatives who use our gift of design to bring peace to people's lives. All right, we worked with hundreds of companies across the world, worked with thousands of people from startups to large corporations. Right. And this past year, we exceeded $1 million in revenue. I'm very proud of that. But all of my experiences leading up to this is what prepared me to be able to do this and to do it authentically. All right, which is the most important fact. And identity architecture, or my title as an identity architect, stemmed from that work in branding. Right, realizing that branding was so much more than just the company and a logo. Right, branding was something very personal, is very individual. And I created a program actually in Madagascar where I help people understand who they were and how to translate that into their work. Right, and continued to do that work with many people. But that was my journey that led me to gain this perspective and start to be able to live my authentic self, to live out my identity and use it, right, to help others, which leads me to today, which is a lot of you came here, right? I said, you don't need a logo, you need an identity. I believe an identity is a unique composition of attributes and experiences that reveal to others who a person truly is. Okay. Is a unique composition of attributes and experience that reveal to others who a person truly is. So a logo is not an identity. However, it is a graphic mark, emblem, symbol, or stylized name used to identify a company, organization, product, or brand. Okay. Some of the questions before this event, people were asking like, is a logo the same as an identity? Or is an identity the same as brand? All right, I'm gonna play this dichotomy out with you guys. So stick with me here. A logo is a graphic mark, emblem, symbol to identify a company, organization, product, or brand. Right? You could even add person in there. All right. So whatever your logo is, it's a way of identifying yourself or your company and what you do. All right. So a lot of people come to me for a logo. You don't even know how many. Every week I get somebody asking me, hey, how much for a logo? Can you create me a logo? And it's probably one of my pet peeves. I think I've only because I've been doing it for so long. I'm like, hey, like, you don't need a logo. Like, who are you? I actually ask them and they get mad at me when I ask them that question. But I ask them that because I'm like, are you even ready for a logo? Do you even understand who you are enough to be able to create a graphic mark, emblem, or symbol, right, to represent who you are? Have you done enough work there? And most of the time they have not, which is where we come in, obviously. All right. So I need a logo, typical use case, right, for a startup founder. A lot of you are entrepreneurs. So you have an idea. Got this idea. I'm going to bring it to life. Right. You test it, you validate it. Maybe you test it, you validate it again, and you test it and validate it again. And ultimately you find a good fit. You're like, all right, got to name it. All right, you create a business, get the LLC or that C corp, you get that EIN. All right, you build a team and ultimately sell your product. Hopefully, sell it comes sooner. Um, but this is the typical flow that I've seen with entrepreneurs. All right, so that the concept of I need a logo typically comes in right after you've named your business. All right, and you maybe created that business. So here's how I see people typically trying to get a logo. Go to your nearest designer. I like to say it this way because go to your nearest convenience store. Go to your nearest designer. All right. Can you make me a logo? Sure. It's going to cost this much. All right. They ask you a few questions. You answer them. Maybe it's in a type form. Maybe you just send them via email. Maybe it's in a conversation. They design a few concepts for you. You hate them, right? Which means you start over all over again with the same designer, or you go find another one. All right. Or you love it and boom, we have a brand, right? Easy as that. But it's not that easy, right? It's so much more than that. Brand is not just a logo. Um, what's crazy is the average cost of a logo design, found these out just doing a little Google research, is $300 to $1,300. Right. One of the sponsors here today is Design Pickle. All right. So you have a lot of these sites coming up, which are standardizing and I want to say commoditizing this idea of a logo. And when you commoditize a logo, you're commoditizing your identity. I found this chart on 99 Designs, what I thought was interesting. If you see where the red underline part is, extremely budget and time conscious businesses that are okay with a generic design. I I don't know about any of you, but like who's okay with a generic design? I mean, I think we're transitioning in life now where generic is not okay. We want to be intentional about how we design things, but specifically a logo, right? Yeah, $10 to $50, that's cheap. Right? You go on Design Pickle or 99 Designs, and you can put in, I got this much, and they'll give you some options. But really, what are you asking for? How are they designing it for you? How are they representing you in the marketplace? Right? And I struggle with this, and I actually really uh passionate about this topic because like branding and like your logo and your identity is so intimate. It's so personal. I mean, think about all of you who are doing startups right now. Like, how much time do you spend working on your startup, selling your product, building relationships, building a network, raising capital? How much time do you spend doing that? Are you going to do that with a generic identity? Are you going to do that with a generic mark that represents who you are? I hope not. All right. So going back to a logo definition, right? Like there should be nothing generic about how you identify yourself when you're a startup founder and when you're attempting to change the world or do something that nobody else has done. At least that's my opinion. All right. So I want to why this baffles me so much is because I mean most angel investors, they're not investing in the business, right? But instead they're investing in what? I'm sure most of you know this answer. They're investing in you. They're investing in you as a person, right? You and your team. They're betting on you. They're not betting on your business. Maybe they are, right? A little bit. They're not betting on your logo for sure, right? They're betting on you. So by understanding who you are, ultimately you're going to be better prepared to have these conversations with investors, to represent yourself authentically, right? And to share who you are with other people. All right. So I want to ask the question like, what if understanding your identity can differentiate you more than anything else, more than your product, more than your company, more than your team, more than your logo? so on and so forth, right? What if understanding your identity could do that? And I'm here to make the argument that it can. I'm here to make the argument that by understanding who you are, your unique composition of attributes and experiences, that's what's going to help you differentiate yourself. Because as entrepreneurs, as startup founders, what are you doing? You're trying to differentiate yourself from all the other players out there, all of the other clutter. Okay. So that brings me back to this identity architect title. I came up with this title because I realized that branding was so much more than just something that was for a business. Right? It was very innately personal, as I've already started to share with you. I actually flew to Madagascar, Antananarivo, Madagascar, to teach design or community leaders design thinking and branding. Right? What I realized was how rare it was for them to think about themselves. Who am I? What are my unique strengths? What are my unique values? What are my unique experiences that I've lived in my life? They wouldn't ask themselves those questions. All they were attempting to do was to tell us what they were doing, what problem they were solving, or what their company was, why their company was going to be so great. And I realized this. I experienced this in my time actually in Phoenix with working with many entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, right? For-profit entrepreneurs, ecosystem investors, the beautiful ecosystem of Phoenix, right? Most of the time we're trying to tell people what we're doing versus actually understanding who we are. All right. So I started to realize that this was a unique gift of mine to help people understand their identity. All right. And that's why at a small studio, we believe that everything starts with identity. Everything from the clothes you wear to the way you answer your voicemail, all right, to the way you speak, the way you present, your obviously the way you run your business, your culture, all right, so on and so forth. All right, so I want to go back to that definition. Identity is a unique composition of attributes and experiences that reveal to others who a person, and then we can add in a group or an organization truly is. All right, we realized that it was so much, branding was so much more than that. We realized that branding was actually a reflection of who someone is into the marketplace. All right, but how could you create somebody's brand? And the logo being a small part of that, which I'll get to in a second. How could you create somebody's brand if you don't know who they are? Truly, you learned a lot about me at the beginning of this conversation. And I wanted to start by sharing who I am and a lot of my experiences with you. But how could you create somebody's brand? How could you build your own brand without knowing who you truly are? All right. So I say a brand is a reflection of who you are in the marketplace. And I like to stick to this because a brand is very complicated. And no matter who you ask, they'll tell you a brand is something different. Okay. It's been around for a long time. And obviously, branding is what runs our capitalistic society. So branding is very important. All right. And I'm not saying different. It's what pays our bills and it's very important. But I believe that it's so much more than just trying to get people to consume what you do. It's actually a representation of who you are. What if you think about it that way? How much more important does it become to you? All right. So I'm going to dive into branding and how we see it. All right. I'm sure you've seen iceberg analogy before. I just used it because everybody uses it and I think it'd be a lot easier for you to understand. Some of the questions before the event talked about, like, are you going to talk about the difference between a logo and a brand? And here it is, just for context. So logo is the flag on top of the mountain, right? It's the flag that people wave. All right. It's a way that people understand and identify you. So it's a way that people can ambassador for you and influencers can promote on your behalf. Right. And a name is very similar. A name is the first word of your story as a brand. Right. So these are two very important assets, but we tend to jump the gun on these assets of a brand, right? Because they're one part of it. All right. There's so much more that goes below that surface. And that's where the identity conversation starts to come in. A lot of what I shared with you. All right. So there's five aspects of a brand that I like to just talk about and communicate. Okay. So brand strategy is the first one. All right. It's about discovering who we are and positioning ourselves against a crowded market. Guarantee you, no matter what industry you're in, it's pretty crowded. All right. Sometimes it's not as crowded, uh, but it's not as accessible when you get those types of industries. But you're trying to position yourself against a crowded market. So strategy is always important to start with because you got to understand who else is around you in order to position yourself either right with them or separate from them, right? Especially for startups, right? You have limited funds. So you want to use your funds wisely. So you probably don't want to position yourself against, the cruise ship in that body of water. You probably want to, keep your distance from that cruise ship because they have a lot more money and resources than you do. All right. And by positioning yourself, it can serve as an incredible strategic advantage for you and save you a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time. All right. And then the name comes in. Usually, once you are able to position yourself, you can come up with a name that's distinct and meaningful and memorable, right? It becomes an asset to advance your brand, right? So, if a person, like to ask the question, if a person has a list of 10 brand names, would yours stand out, right? We've come up with names for a lot of different brands over the years. And one of the hardest things about naming is the emotional side of naming. And that's probably the hardest thing for design period. But another aspect is just there's so many names out there. There's so much clutter. How do you find a name that's unique and distinct and meaningful, but also available, right? So that you can use it as an asset versus a hindrance because of availability or on social media or on your website or, obviously trademarks. Brand identity is the third one. We talk about brand identity as a visual component to the brand, right? It's the tip of the iceberg. Everything I was talking about, that flag that you wave. You'll see some brand identities coming up, but this is what most people think of when they think of brand. They think of the brand identity or the visual components of it. Okay. Typically, you can't come up with the visual components of a brand until you know the name and you know how you're positioning yourself. You know who else is around you, how you can differentiate yourself via the brand assets like color, typography, so on and so forth. Okay. And then brand experience. All right. This is one of my favorite ones because this goes all the way to how you answer your voicemail. All right. How you respond to emails, your email signature, right? The way that people speak at your organization, the way you present your work, the way you customer service, so on and so forth. So once you understand your brand, the components that are not I want to say not experiential, right? Your website, so on and so forth. Like now you can use those that understanding of who you are and how you operate. You can use that to really change the way that people see you and engage with you, right? Brand experience is one of the most powerful aspects of a brand. You know, one of the things I love most about, dare I say, Amazon, but my wife works for Amazon, is customer service. Hands down, right? Uh, like I buy anything from Amazon because I know that no matter what, I'll be able to get my money back or exchange it. And I've had nothing but great experiences with their customer service. Right. That's just one example, but I think you get the gist of that. And then lastly, you got brand management. Right? It's all about sustaining and building a stronger brand through all parts of a growing and complex organization. Brand management is when people start to talk about brand equity, right? So brand equity is you like your brand is actually worth something, right? And it takes a long time to cause your brand to be worth something. You have to build a following. You have to build a certain amount of awareness, right? You have to build a consistent message, a consistent experience, a consistent standard of excellence, right? You know the difference between an Apple commercial that was like brought to you by Apple and an Apple commercial that was brought to you by Verizon or AT&T, right? You probably see the difference in the quality of those commercials, but you better believe that those commercials that AT&T and Verizon put out were approved by Apple, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed to do so because Apple has a they manage their brand because they have an incredible brand equity, and any flaw would hurt their brand equity, right? So brand management is one of the most important pieces that most people don't think about, right? Oh, I have a logo, but I don't apply it to any other aspect of my business. All right. Brand management is one of those things that continues on for the duration and the lifetime of the company. All right. And you have to manage how people engage with you, how people respond to emails, how people do customer service, right? How partners engage with you, how they use your brand, so on and so forth. Okay. So that's a really quick synopsis of branding and how I see it. I can't see questions, but if there are any questions coming up, I think Kate, you'll let me know, right? I'm just going to keep on going in this virtual environment we're living in. You're on mute, Kate.
Yes, we have quite a few questions. Sorry, it's
Okay.
it's the mask and the headphones. It's very
Yeah.
confusing.
It's a good pause point before I move on. So
Okay, great.
yeah.
Yeah, let's get into it. The first question, is there one color that you notice conveys the feeling of trust to consumers over other colors?
Oh, that's an easy one. So, color psychology is very very common. So all you do is Google, go on Google and Google, color that conveys trust or branding colors that convey this. You'll see a color spectrum, but blue is the color that conveys trust the most. That's why you see blue on a lot of social media platforms, Facebook blue, um, you know, Twitter blue, yada yada yada. Most social platforms are blue because of that specific reason.
LinkedIn blue.
LinkedIn
Um,
blue.
okay, the next one, is identity the manner in which a corporation, firm, business, or enterprise presents itself to the public or consumers? Or is it the way that the public or consumers tell each other about what it is? It's a good question.
Um, that's a great question. I think it's both, right? So a well crafted identity is, remember, identity is you and your team. It's a representation of you and your team, right? So those unique attributes and experiences. So when you understand those well, right, you're going to be able to communicate them well. All right. But when you don't understand those well, that's where you struggle with messaging. That's where you struggle with, your value proposition. That's where you struggle with a lot of those things that market yourself out to others. So when you understand that well and you market yourself out well, yourself to others well, they can now communicate back to you exactly who you are and exactly what you do and exactly how you provide value. That's why you have incredible loyalty when it comes to brand ambassador programs and community brands. Right. My whole business has been built on referrals only. We haven't got $1 from outside, um, organic inbound, leads. However, that's because every person that we work with understands who we are and how we operate and how we work, right? And that's a testament to um, great identity understanding and great communication of that identity.
Awesome. Um, what is the best way to identify identity? Maybe this is a little redundant. Um, internal, external, both. Is it based on your values, your products and services, people and founder, mission and vision, communication? And is there a maturity framework on when you need what?
That's a really great question. Um, so I'm gonna get into a little bit of that as we move forward. However, I do want to say that identity, you got to think of, I like to think of identity as the very human aspect of business, right? And then you have the translation of your identity into the marketplace, which is branding. Okay. So at every stage of your business, you're going to need different assets of branding, right? Maybe at the beginning, all you need is a website. But in order to build a website, you got to have, your logo, you got to have your color palettes, you got to have your type, you got to have photography, right? You got to understand your product messaging, right? Communicate that value proposition, your CTAs, so on and so forth, right? You may have to have customer service set up, e-commerce platform, so on and so forth, right? So every business is different. But what I found that's consistent across every one of them, I could put that in my bio for this project, is everyone has to start with identity. So I don't want you to think about identity as branding. You got to think of identity as like right here. So especially if you're a solo startup founder, or maybe there's two of you, maybe there's three of you, a small team, you got to start right here first. Understand those unique experiences that you've lived, your unique perspective on the world and why. And then once you do that, you can go hire a designer on Dribble or on Design Pickle, and they're going to know exactly what they need to translate through your brand, right? But if you don't do that, you're going to go on, you know, those platforms, and they're going to design whatever they want because you didn't give them enough information to represent you properly.
Yeah, authenticity is extremely important. We have a
Mhm.
couple more. I don't know if you want to pause and finish or you want me to continue on.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I want to pause again.
Okay, got it. All right,
So we'll
here we
come back.
go. Okay. All right. So I'll go away again and then you let me know and I'll pop back on with the rest of the
Yeah.
questions.
Yep.
Continue on. This is
That's
great.
perfect. Awesome. Awesome. So I paused here because this is a great transition into just the work that we've done. All of these brands that you see on the screen, we've designed and created from scratch. Some of them are startups. Some have, of over $1 billion market cap right now. Some don't even exist any longer. Right. Number of them are actually Phoenix based startups. All right. Well, we went through a lot of your questions that you just asked me. We went through an intensive process with each and every one of these brands to make sure that the founders or the leadership team was represented powerfully through these marks, through these icons, through these colors, even. Right. So you could see even names, specific names for some of these brands. Right. But then there's also obviously conceptual names. We come up with some of these names. Even my first startup, feel free up there. Right. But like I said before, we worked with hundreds of brands across the world, but we've always committed to this process, this methodology of everything starts with identity. So identity architecture is a framework that I came up with because I realized how human the branding process was, everything I just shared with you. All right. I say identity architecture is a human centered praxis that empowers individuals, strengthens communities, and reshapes cultural outcomes. All right. So, by going through identity architecture and understanding how to understand your identity, you can empower yourself, empower others. Maybe that's your teammates, your co founders, your customers, strengthen your community around your company, the communities that you're within, maybe communities that you support, right? And reshaping cultural outcomes that will not allow you to continue doing things that you may have overcome in your past. For instance, with me, a great example of, I didn't want to be one of three Black entrepreneurs in the Phoenix entrepreneurial ecosystem any longer. All right. You'll hear from Centauri later this week. Me and Centauri always joked about the fact that everybody always called us each other's names because there were just a few of us. Right. So that's why I went out there and I created the Black Entrepreneurship Bootcamp at Seed Spot, because I'm like, how do we start to reshape cultural outcomes? for the Phoenix startup ecosystem. All right. So, and I believe like identity architecture is the way of doing that. Okay. And that's what I do with all of my clients. And those are the workshops that I offer, and so on and so forth. So, this has been a way of me um, really approaching branding and approaching my work in a way that I don't believe anybody else has done. As Kate mentioned, right, authenticity is really important. So as I mentioned before, we did this. I did this in Madagascar for the first time, launched the pilot there, and since then have worked with hundreds of different entrepreneurs and just individuals across the nation and across the world. But once again, I realized that it was so important for people to look within in order to project outside more authentically. Okay. So after saying all of that, I want to ask you that question again, like, who are you really? And I joke about this, but I'm serious. When I interview people for jobs, and as we built our team at a small studio, I always ask them that question, like, "Who are you?" And they give me a cookie cutter answer, like, "I did this, and I'm so and so from this place, and I specialize in this type of design, and I got my degree from this." And after they say all of those things, I ask them, "Okay, well, thank you for all of that, but who are you really?" And when I add that really there, I think they get the hint that I want them to go a little bit below the surface. All right. And I've I want to say I've practiced hard and long to help people go below the surface, especially my clients, because I feel like that's where you get the nuggets. All right. So um man, it's time. What time do we go to, Kate? 45? Huh.
You go to 50.
50. Okay.
Mhm.
So I have what, like 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh,
Oh.
well, 8 minutes.
Okay. Okay. 8 minutes. All right. So I'm gonna jump through this. This is the workshop segment of the program. Um I think I got lost in my computer screen as I'm chatting virtually. But I want you to think about this question. And I came up with a framework that will allow you to easily start to break down your identity, right, from the very beginning, very surface level. Right. I usually run my clients through a 4-hour workshop and an 8-hour workshop to dissect all of this information. But for you, we have 8 minutes. So remember, I want you to start with your name. In the polling questions, we all asked, I asked you all if you knew the meaning of your name, and everybody who replied said yes. All right. So your name is the first word of your story. The name is the first thing that you say to anybody when they ask you that question. All right. It's a very important aspect of your identity. All right. So I want you to ask yourself these questions. If you don't know the definition of your name, look it up. All right. But more importantly, what does your name mean to you? And what do you want your name to mean to others? All right. What does your name mean to you? And what do you want your name to mean to others? Those questions are much more important, because if it doesn't matter what your name, the definition of your name means, but when somebody says your name, like, what do you want them to feel? What do you want them to see? These are the attributes that come up when you introduce yourself to someone. All right. Um, I'm not going to go through this example, but my buddy Tomas went through the workshop, and he always thought of his name as doubting Thomas from the Bible, right? But eventually, he was able to take his name, which was defined as to take, right? But we said, I want my name to mean to take what I've been given and to make more, or más, which the Spanish name for más is more. The Spanish word for more is más. So he came up with the name Más Creative for his company. So just by dissecting his own name, he was able to come up with a name for his company that was much more meaningful and deep than any other name that he might have come up with generically. All right. So I want you to start with your name, and remember that attribute, that unique composition of attributes. Your name is an attribute of yours, and how you want people to perceive you and perceive your name is a great place to start with an attribute, right? A quality or feature regarded to as a characteristic or inherent part of someone. Okay. Then I want you to dive into your story. You heard my story. and some aspects of my story. But your story is what gives you a one of kind perspective. So many founders, I don't want you to jump over the fact that you did something incredible, because most likely that incredible thing that you did or that you overcame or that you were a part of, right, is exactly what's going to make you the perfect founder for your organization, the perfect leader for your organization. All right. So you can ask yourself questions like impactful experiences you've lived, and what are the chapters of your life in your book? All right. Where have you been the only? Very similar to my story. These are how I found out that, hey, John, you are unique. You have a unique perspective, and you can solve this problem in the world in a very unique way because of your story. All right. And Buddy Drew Shaw was an author of a book, a children's book that was about mismatched socks. And we were able to come up with a Motley Rose that was inspired by his character in there, David Motley. And he chose this icon to move forward within the branding process. All right. And since then, we've obviously launched that, and you might have heard of Drew Shaw and Voice Threads here in Phoenix. But he's now been able to use this brand, this icon, so much deeper than just a rose, because that's cool and that's beautiful. All right. But it's actually a representation of his story, his an experience as an author, a child's book author. Right. So you could see how just these different aspects of your identity can make things so much more meaningful and deeper for you. All right. So don't overlook your identity when you're thinking about branding, because I guarantee you that identity, and I'm going to skip over this, that identity is going to be the fuel that can motivate you for a lifetime. When you find a need that you're uniquely equipped to solve, right? It could fan the flames inside of you and be your motivation for a lifetime. Okay. And I like to say also, the moment we use our experiences to help others, the purpose is realized. Right? Use your experiences that you've lived to help others. If you don't have a startup, if you don't have a startup idea, your experiences could be that idea. All right. If you do have a startup, lean on your experiences. All right. And not try to be somebody else out there. Okay. Not try to be another founder. Just be yourself. Understand yourself. And then you'll be able to project more authentically and more powerfully. And honestly, I think everybody would appreciate it if you did so. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to stop there for questions. And yeah.
Wow, that was great. And you'll see when you get a chance to look at the comments how moved everybody was by your presentation. So
I can't wait.
if you're on Huva right now, he's going to be on there, I'm sure, answering questions and interacting with
I will
you.
be.
Yeah, John has already been super great about that. So why don't we, you can also post your deck on there if you want to, or any of the parts of the workshop that you feel compelled to share.
Yeah.
Okay, Phoenix, let's say thank you to John Johnson. We so appreciate you coming back and giving of your gifts and sharing your
Yeah.
story with us. We're better for it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.